In my marriage, that was absolutely the case. If he said, "You look beautiful today," I was on cloud nine. If he said, "You're disposable and ugly," of course, I went right down the tubes. And so somebody else, I mean, the truth of the matter is that we're all human. And so what other people think about us or what other people say about us will have an impact. And so certainly what I'm always trying to do in my own life and supporting my clients in doing is find people who speak life. Find the people who lift you up. And when you start to come in and start to notice that this person has stopped doing that or doesn't do that, make some choices about that. Take care of yourself, protect yourself. And that too is a learned behavior, because when you haven't been protected, when you've been at the mercy of somebody else's choices, you often have this longing for somebody to come along and protect you and nurture you in the ways that you wish that that person who harmed you had. And so releasing that, grieving that loss, and then coming into your own power, your own purpose, being your own self-protector, then that helps you in making those choices and setting better boundaries and deciding what you're really going to let into your life.
How do you want to help protect the next generation of men and women
Mm.
from this type of abuse? Because we're seeing it, it's happening, but what safeguards would you suggest to them, or would you want to help them protect the next generation?
Mhm. Yeah, the prevention piece, I'll be straight about it. It feels like such a daunting task that I barely let myself dive into that space. I have great colleagues. I have great communities and great organizations who are really tackling that piece of the puzzle. And places like Rain, places like 1 in 6, places like trying to think like Leslie's Kids, they're really working with the younger generation and teaching them about consent, teaching them about safety, about choice, awareness. And all of these things. And so I love collaborating with these organizations to play a bit of a part in the prevention. What's really so is that, at the end of the day, I guess I might hold a somewhat pessimistic view about our capacity to stop trauma from happening, to stop abuse from happening. What I think about when it comes to children in particular is how do we embolden them to find their voice, to speak up, to have the awareness. When I was a nanny, like from the time the kids were very little, we were having conversations, right, about safe touch, what to do, even if I do something that you don't like, these sorts of things. And so the more parents can be educated or caregivers can be educated, along with really just empowering our children to speak up and speak out, such that if something does happen, it isn't in the shadows for years, but can more immediately be addressed there, thus reducing the impact, of that trauma. Um, yeah, I guess that's where I land on that. Yep.
Absolutely. Do you think that may be a redefining of the trauma and what abuse is? And I'll ask the reason why I ask that is, I mean, I'm probably not as versed as you are because I don't have your experience, but the knowledge base between the two of us is there. So we know based on our experiences and our age, and of course our knowledge and our academic, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. But that may differ from person to person. We can embrace between the two of us is perfectly
Mhm.
fine, but we can go, I can embrace someone else the same way, you can embrace someone else the same way, two different results,
Totally.
right? So it's not that I intended or you intended, it's just it happened, it's interpreted that way. Um, do we need a redefining, and also on top of that, does the conversation and communication have to be stronger now than ever?
Oh my goodness, these are such good questions. So there's so many layers here. I mean, where do I even begin? So the first thing that comes to mind is how even within, you think about cultural differences and the ways in which love and affection and touch might show up differently between different cultures. That can play a role and have an impact on what somebody might think of as appropriate or inappropriate. Then there is, I mean, one beef that I certainly do have when I think about what are we teaching our children, how are we helping our children feel empowered and feel safe, is the idea of good touch, bad touch. I don't think that languaging is actually effective or helpful when trying to talk with children about what might happen to them and what they might experience and what to do about it. Because of the very fact that specifically around sexual trauma, the touch feels good. And of course, that's one of the complexities of sexual trauma is, again, the confusion. My body is responding in a positive way to this touch because that's what our bodies are supposed to do. That's how we're built. But it's within the context of something that creates that dissonance because it's not supposed to be you. It's certainly not supposed to be now at this age. And so to teach a child, there's good touch and there's bad touch, it's actually, I think, quite confusing. And so what's the alternative? How do we language that instead? Looking at those sorts of nuances and beginning to think about what is the actual situation? What is actually going on? What does a child actually need to know about their body and about when, it's okay for somebody and when it's not okay? What's really so, kind of talking around it, I'm getting there.
I love it. I love it. Keep going. Keep going. I got time. I told you I got time.
That time. What's really so is that you'll never, ever, ever be able to account for every circumstance and every situation that a child might be put in. And that this is an evolving conversation. One thing I always say to my parents is this is not a conversation you get to have once with your child and you're done. Like, put it on the calendar. Every 6 months, we're going to have a conversation about your body, about sex, about this, about that. Because the complexity of what feels okay and what feels safe and what feels like, again, this word appropriate, and the child being able to distinguish between, I don't know it at all, these definitions, these words, but what I know is that I don't feel safe.
And that's the big piece.
Yeah.
Huge piece.
Yeah. And so if we can help children understand and connect into their intuition, and quite frankly, adults too, right? Both my male and female clients struggle with this in their own relationships, listening to those instincts and not succumbing to the, well, I should be okay with this. It's just an innocent little thing, right? Like, whatever. But no, ultimately, underneath any of it, there's the sense of, I do not feel safe. Then we've got a problem here. So perhaps that's the lens, and that's a way of beginning to kind of change the conversation, as you were kind of talking about, like, what do we need to do differently?